All right, welcome back to the Pure Playbook. I'm Dr. Dustin Boston with the Dr. Nate Merhout. Here we go, another great episode. You have put together a fine list of introductory topics here for season number 2, we're calling it. Today we'll be talking about coping with pressure and expectations, managing the mental and academic side of being a student athlete. This one's pretty good. This one I've gone on record saying that the mental aspect of all of this is really something that hits home for me, and I think something that's very underserved in today's day and age is starting to be talked about more. However, I think if we can get some of this out sooner and a feeling around this and some services, some education, and some mindset on this, I think it's going to be a huge help. I know it's going to be a huge help when it comes to student athletes, for sure.
Yeah, there can be a stigma to it, so we want to remove that stigma and make sure that we're getting the content out there so that it's easier for the athletes to have those conversations when they need to have them, whether it's with their parents, their coaches, their peers, everybody surrounding them, the teachers, professors, all those people that are involved with the student athlete, and so that we can basically move in the right direction from the mental component of things. Even just in the office, we really want to address that, and we address it all the time on how much that plays into both the injury as well as the healing side of things and the journey you go through whenever you're dealing with something like that. So there's a lot of good content in this. Well, if we spend a little time on it, we might, but we'll try to get you, the shortened versions so we're not spending 2.5 hours like we might have originally wanted to do, but we'll have to break this up if we need to in multiple segments.
Yeah, I mean, no, it can go long because the combination, especially between the two of us, when you bringing a lot of the relevant, the research, the details as far as that's concerned, and then me bringing a lot of the heart and implementation and mindset and perspective around it. This could be 20 minutes. This could be 4 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah,
Let's see where it goes.
So starting off just with understanding, what the pressures are, where those are coming from. A lot of them, pressures, let's just start out, pressures from the coaches, pressures from your parents is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
What those expectations are, which we need certain expectations from our coaches, from our parents, but how much is too much? Where do you draw the line? Certain players are going to, respond differently. So you even have to approach it differently from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers, peers, your other players on the team are going to give certain pressure and expectations based on who you are as a player and, where they want you to be together as a team.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different components and things that play into it. So it's like you're getting pressure from all different avenues.
I think one of the things, and just speaking from my experience personally as I was growing up too, mom and dad don't hate me for saying this because I mean it in no other way, but sometimes it's the unexpected, like you don't know what to expect as far as what pressures are on me, what is expected of me, and that's kind of what I went through is dad always lived by no plan's the plan. So that was kind of my household, but that also leaked into, here's the expectation. Here's how we need to view this. Here's the priorities. It is on some level, it's school first. You have to be eligible to play, but helping something that would have helped me, and I know it's going to help a lot of other student athletes, is understanding that you have to be eligible to play, but you also school is the avenue, the carrot is the sport. And let it be that way. Enjoy the process. Because the school, there's very few student athletes that are like, man, I love school and I love playing baseball or whatever sport it is.
Right.
And so figuring out, where's the chocolate kernel in the school that's going to get you excited and going and where's the sweet aspect of school? Find out what that is because it's only as hard as you make it. But some of the uncertainty of what was I supposed to do? It wasn't really talked about in my household. And I think that can be another component, too, of the uncertainty of pressure, because then all of a sudden you feel the pressure and you're like, whoa, where did this come from? I didn't see it coming.
Yeah. And I approached it even from a different perspective when I was playing sports growing up, where I was the one that was kind of setting the expectations for myself. And I wasn't getting a ton of that from parents and other coaches. So there can also be, from what I see, not enough sometimes. So knowing, what is enough and also tailor it towards the athlete, because different athletes will respond differently to different things. But I was pretty much setting my own expectations, and I could have performed with a couple different sports at a higher level. But if I would have had someone else like pushing me, or giving me those expectations higher than what I was giving myself, could I have done better? Would I have done better? That kind of thing. So there's those questions. But there's that fine line between, the too much pressure and too much expectations, or even not enough. And that's kind of what I experienced growing up.
Yeah. No, see, the perspectives are key.
Yeah.
And that's why we want to deliver this to all of you guys, because I think it's going to hit home with some of you, with some of you, whether you're a student athlete or a parent. And keeping in mind that, no different than in our office when we see student athletes or general clientele, like, our job is to lead people in their health, not what do you need now, not what do you, and same with these student athletes. It's like, the old saying, like, you're not here to be their friend, you're here to be their parent. Like, lead them. It's okay, but have a conversation and make sure that conversation is like, hey bud, or hey princess, whichever way you're, boy or girl, doesn't matter. But sit them down, your daughter or your son, sit them down and just be like, hey, hear them first. How do you feel this is going? You're getting ready to start high school, or you're in junior high, or, how's things going at practice? How do you feel about your school schedule? How's class going? And just hear them with really no agenda up front other than just reading them. Right. And then from there, just be like, is there anything I can help with? Because I see the same things too. I see, the grades slouching a little bit. Is there something I can help you with? Is it a time thing? And help them through that. Not, you got to get your grades up. Why are you doing this? We're going to take this away. You're not going to be able to play if you don't. It's like, no. Lead them, give them some expectation, and have that conversation of, let me help. Here's how we can do this. What are your thoughts? Here's my thoughts. Let's get you into an avenue that you're more comfortable and that we can hold each other accountable for. Hey, Dad, you haven't thrown the ball with me today to practice my pitches. Or, hey, Mom, I could use your help reading. Or, hey, hon, we got to get your homework done first before we go do that. And let that be communication, and let that be accountability and responsibility, because time over time, and allowing them and their peers to see that that's happening, eventually they're going to be able to teach that too, because then their peers around them are going to need help as well. And if you can teach it, you're obviously doing it well, but having that conversation at home, I think, is a great start. And lead them. Be, like we say here, be the doctor, be the parent. It's okay.
Yeah. We also have to acknowledge with this topic that the student athlete wears so many different hats. And it's obviously the academic side that we mentioned. It's the athletic side that we mentioned. Sometimes there's relationships, like the boyfriend-girlfriend aspect that they're managing. And there can be ups and downs with that. Their peers and other
social
issues,
life.
Issues on the team, off the team. Are you hanging out with the players on the field, off the field, that kind of thing. So all the different hats that they have to wear and how to manage that. And we'll get a little bit on some tips and tricks and techniques that you can use to navigate some of this, the pressures and the expectations, and how to get that, as well as, when it's time to ask for help. And it's okay to ask for help when that's necessary. But, we're not just saying some of this stuff to say it. There is research that does back it. And, simply to get into some of it, is when there is stress put on an athlete, there's a certain response that the body has. And one of those biggest responses is the fight or flight response that you get. So any type of stress, there can be good and bad stress, which we can get into that a little bit if we want. But the good stress is you can even turn a bad stress into a good stress just based on your outlook and the mindset that you have with things, and change the way that your body responds to that, whether it be the fight or flight, and you change your perspective on it and turn it into a motivating factor that releases different hormones and different things within the body to drive you as opposed to stress you out. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sympathetic overload, your fight or flight response, sympathetic atonia, as they call it in the business, is huge, because it does release cortisol, and cortisol changes cognitive thought and function and how you think. It also is a key component in blood pressure going up and down. But it also just from a healthcare perspective and an injury perspective, it increases the opportunity for injury too, because of the hormones that are released and how they respond within the body, which is a whole nother different biochemistry deal that I will spare you, which is my love and background, is the biochemistry side. But it is very real, because, and like you said, when that stress comes in, this is where this can go long, because how it affects not only gameplay, but then school activities, sleep, social encounters, and then you see things like grades start to change or whatever that might be. The stress response that cascade is a huge waterfall that can happen in so many areas that if we can get to this sooner and create communication around this and just make, whether you're a student athlete or a parent, aware of this, talk about it, because like you said, there are tips and tricks and how to retrain the brain, and create those links of, okay, the positivity, how do we make, where's the silver lining and how can we use this to our advantage? What am I supposed to learn here? There's questions that you can start to ask yourself, and even just like, holy cow, I recognize this is going on, or I see them going through this, whether you're watching it or experiencing it as an athlete, as soon as you know that's happening, take a second. There's the count to 5 rule and there's all that, but literally be very cognitive and take a second. And I don't care if there's a song that increases your spirit. That's something that I have found over time, even during baseball. You've got your hype songs and you've got your love songs. And, when you're on the up, you hear the music. When you're on the down, you hear the lyrics.
Right.
So recognizing where you're at in that, and if you need your spirit lifted, you can, that's something that I resort to. There's different mechanisms, but that's just an example of, take a second. Where am I at? If you have a second to play a song, if you're in the car or maybe after that practice, be like, listen to this. If that's a reset, do that. But there's multiple things like that you can do to start to change that energy of that stress.
Yeah. And if you're not doing those things, then we run the risk of going down to, the chronic fatigue, the burnout, the, stress injuries, those kinds of things, because we're not focused on what the ultimate goal and the outcome is with the sport. And so if we're not addressing those issues early on, then that's when we run into the burnout stuff, and then it doesn't become enjoyable to be in the sport anymore.
So on that, let's make this real. I'll ask you a question just on that, because you bring up a good point, and now I want to kind of drive it home into like very applicable scenarios. So as you start to increase stress, increase the burnout, and things start to change cognitively, mentally, physically, performance starts to change on all ends. Like, what are some things that impacts? And I kind of just gave some of them away, but as far as, what could you expect to see in the locker room or at home with some of these student athletes as that starts to happen long-term, chronically, we'll say?
Yeah. So I think some athletes are going to respond a little bit differently based on what their personalities are. But one thing you can see is maybe it's changing appetite. Maybe they're not putting on the weight that they want, or they're losing some weight. So from not eating what they should be eating when they are, because one, they don't have the appetite because there's different hormones that are being released that are suppressing that. So then you for lack of a better term, maybe going down that depressive state or depressed mode of a mindset because of that burnout. So from a mental standpoint, we get into that.
It's like they'd never miss breakfast.
Right. Yeah. So like, what are you seeing from that standpoint? With the mood, your teammates, your professors, and your coaches are going to be the ones that are seeing them almost every single day. Sometimes when it comes to the student athlete, the parents are the ones that are actually seeing them the least. But at the same time, if they're seeing them the least, they might notice more of the drastic changes. Whereas the people that are with them every day, those small changes over time, they may not be picking up on. So it is a whole comprehensive approach, is just as healthcare is, where everybody needs to be involved in picking up on some of these things that are changing with the athlete, whether it is the eating habits, the sleeping patterns, their mood, how they're responding to joking around and things like that. Are they easily triggered on all those kinds of things? So
what's their sleep schedule look like?
Yeah.
Is their sleep schedule changing? They've always got up, game and then school the next day, and they're up and they're ready to go, a little groggy, a little tired, but now they're like sleeping in. It's hell to get them up. And those are some things too that I kind of went through as well. As it's like, I'm not an early bird. Like, I do get up early. I'm not an early morning person, but I try hard. But if things like that change, they go to sleep too early, they're up all night, vice versa, there's things like that even change.
Yeah. So picking up on some of those triggers, everybody needs to be involved in if that does happen. But I think Sam's got a little interjection.
I have a question for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
How does that look in female athletes versus male athletes?
Good question.
Well, back when I was a female, I can tell. Well, just kidding. That's a great question, Producer Sam. I'm going to go let's say off the record, I'm just going to give perspective here, and because I don't want to say this is how, because I'm not one. I haven't experienced that from a female's perspective, but I think you do. I think you do see differences there as far as how it's handled. I would say more emotional would be one of the ones I would say. Just having been around that, having coached softball girls from the age of 9 to 12, and I've even said if I could coach girls or boys, I'd coach girls all day long. But a little more emotional, a little more, I don't want to say depressive for the fact of diagnosing it, but I think that's what everybody's going to know as far as like a being, just that somber, like reclusive, or maybe bingeful, where I think in men you become, or young boys even, you become a little more resentful, do it on my own, I don't need any help, and you become a little more, I don't even want to say ego. Like it might be perceived as ego. It's like, oh, he thinks he's too good, he doesn't need the help. Maybe a little more angry, a little more on edge, a little more physical and just intense, I think, is the differences you would see in that. However, it's not to say that some boys, young men don't act the same way, where, they are a little more depressive or they get reclusive. But I would say probably by and large, that's what you would see different. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree everything with what you said. I would even take it a step further and kind of change Sam's question and even be more so along the lines of how does it change based on sport? Because some sports are more individual sports, some sports are more team sports. Mm-hmm. So even the expectations back based on that, you can look at it from wrestling versus football. Whereas wrestling, your expectations for yourself and maybe just your coach and your parents, that small group, that knit of people, versus the team aspect of everybody is relying on you type of thing. So even that changes, how you would respond and what types of expectations and pressures are put on you based on what the sport is. So I could see it more being different with that as opposed to male and female.
Is there any difference in what stress does to the body in female athletes versus male athletes? Is there something that parents should be looking for physically in their girls versus for their boys?
I think one of the easy ones to say is menstrual cycle based on stress.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
So yeah, obviously that's going to be the easy one to point out, is just noticing, are there changes with menstrual cycle and those kind of things. For males, it might be just puberty, and if they're reaching that or going through that, or they're delayed based on what their stresses are in middle school and going through some of that. So that might be one of the things to look at as well from a male to a female standpoint.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously that could be hard to know as a parent too, because once they're becoming that age, they don't, they're not saying, hey, Mom, I missed my period. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not necessarily going to happen. So, but if you are a student athlete, if you are a young lady or you're a woman student athlete or athlete in general, be on the lookout for that, because there's sometimes you might be irregular and it's like, oh, every other month. And then all of a sudden you skip 3. Even though you're irregular, that's still a false pattern, right? A faulty pattern. And you might be super regular and then all of a sudden you miss one, or you're super late and there's been no extracurriculars involved leading you to believe you should be super late. And so noticing that pattern and for you women out there is very important, because if you're not cycling properly, and this can go down a whole healthcare side of like, oh, I'm on birth control, that eliminates my cycle. It's like, whoa, that needs to happen for a reason, and that's a different conversation. But if you're going through that, just know there could be some toxicity conversations that we're going to need to have, and inflammatory responses, and how that does change the physiology of the body if you are not cycling correctly.
Right. So is it stress? Is it the overtraining? Is it something, nutritionally? So there's multiple different things that we'd have to look at from that standpoint. But yes, stress and the expectations, that can play a role in it for sure. Mm-hmm. And that would be something that you could possibly look for as a female athlete.
And here's one thing I wanted to mention as we transition. I'm sure Dr. Nate's going to take us down another path here. But to finish off that conversation and the previous one is, for you parents out there, also don't be afraid to ask the coaches what they're seeing. Like, hey, I've noticed maybe some things at home. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I know they're with you guys a lot. Is there anything that you have noticed? Do not wait to get feedback. Ask for it.
Yeah.
Because like you said, they are with, they're in bed, they're at school, they're at practice, and they're with parents this much of the time. So don't be afraid, and don't feel like you're going behind their back. Because some parents are like, man, I don't want to like go behind their back and have them find out. No, be the parent, not the friend.
It's in their best interest.
Be the parent. And so ask who they're training with. If they're with them, you know who they are. Trainers, coaches, teachers, whoever it is, and see if they've noticed anything. And they might be able to tip you off and be like, I haven't really thought about it, but now that you asked, I have noticed this. And, their handwriting's a little more messy, and, their grades, while they're similar, it's just I'm not getting the same energy. Like, they'll be able to tip you off.
Yeah, because when it comes down to it, oftentimes the parents will know them the best and kind of what some of those changes are and what to look for. But when we do know that those issues are going on, or even kind of taking a different path where from what we talked about last week, where recovery and preventative stuff that you can do, let's go down that route, but more so for the mental side of things on what are some things you can do from a preventative standpoint or to help manage some of the symptoms and things and the pressures that you're constantly getting. And I'm just going to list off a couple right now, but I want Dr. Dustin here to kind of at least pick his favorite or maybe something that he used to do as an athlete that maybe I'm not going to list on what he did do, but get some personal insight on what maybe one of his favorites are. But some of the things that typically from a research standpoint or some of the more common things that we recommend to our athletes are, different mindfulness practices, progressive muscle relaxation techniques, breathing, breath work, visualization can be key with those kind of things. Time management skills is a big one. Meditation, self-compassion is a big one too, that you're, making sure that you're being kind to yourself because of all the pressures, which is a big component. And then just the communication key can also be a big thing with everybody that we mentioned, coaches, parents, other athletes that are involved. So what's one of your favorites?
Oh, man. I would say something. I'm probably gonna have to go through this because I'll be honest with you. Like, I wish I would have known sooner more things that I could have done. And it's like, now that we're taking care of who we take care of and the message we're trying to get out. I mean, this is a great question because I didn't get a lot of that. I can tell you what probably hindered me the most was communication and asking what could I do to be better, or getting more feedback. Would have helped put me at ease more, because I am the kind of personality who wants to help. Like, I never needed to be the best scorer. I needed, like, basketball, I'm not the best basketball player in the world, but I was a starter at my school, but I always wanted to dish. Like, I always wanted to help. And so the more feedback I could have gotten, I think the more it would have put me at ease on what I could have done better and what everybody else around me needed. And then I could have produced accordingly, which would have made me feel validated and like I executed my job. But I would say, don't sleep on the mindfulness things, because I think one of the things I was very, very hard on myself, and my self-speak was like, man, that sucked, or I played terrible, and looking in the mirror and I am worthy, I am great, I'm going to play well, I'm going to whatever that is. Yes, do that and don't sleep on it. I don't care how stupid you feel doing it. I'm not saying you have to do it in front of a bunch of people, but if you can get your whole team to do it, do that. But I would be in those mindful practices of just being still for a moment and being positive and solution oriented, identifying what some of the big things are and what are some options you have to overcome, and always finding a solution instead of going down the road of this is going to be terrible. So I think the mindful practices to relieve stress would be it, and the communication and being okay with bringing someone in with you to do that you trust. Not somebody that's going to comfort you and be like, oh, it's okay, like a best friend, but somebody who's going to be like, I hear you, let's solve and let's hold accountable, and what do you need, versus like, it's okay to feel that way. Not that it's not okay, but you don't want somebody coddling you and reinforcing that mindful practice when you want them to help you take it to the next level.
Yeah. I think for me, it was.
I hope that's what you wanted, because that's what
No, whatever you want to take it. For me, when I was looking back, I think when I was in sports, it was more the visualization that I would do that would kind of set my expectations and know what I needed to do with each scenario and situation, that whether it was an individual sport or a team sport. But now, if I were to pick one of my favorites, it would probably be along the lines of the breath work and breathing techniques. And the reason for that, bring out the nerd in me again, is that just by something as simple as breathing and focusing on that, you can literally change how your nervous system is functioning, which will ultimately either stress you out more or reduce those stressors and help you manage them. So the nice thing about these techniques and the things that you can do for this is that you really don't need anything extra. Whereas when we were talking about recovery and things last week, with Normatec boots or a cryotherapy chamber or an infrared sauna, those are all devices that you need for recovery. Whereas this, which mental can be recovery too, you can use that, but you don't need any device. You don't necessarily even need an app, which there are great apps out there that can even help you with a lot of this stuff, with the mindfulness, meditation, breath work, all that kind of thing. So we have lots of access to those kind of things. We could even maybe put a couple of our favorites in the comments below. But
well, I'm glad you bring that up too. And this is, this is why, I mean, you push me and you bring new perspectives from my head too, but let me point out and build up why that is so great. And I'm glad you brought that up, is because you don't need anything to do it. And imagine being in state finals and you're the number 10 seed that was never supposed to make it, and you're playing the 1 seed, and it's a ball game and it's the bottom of the 9th and you're getting after it, or it's the 4th quarter with 10 seconds to go. And you've got that timeout. Coach calls time, you've got a second. And if you can just concentrate on that breath work during that time, and it's like, you're going to bat this inning and you're going to do everything you can to perform. What if you knew how to do some of those practices on the bench, on the sideline, to prepare you for when you step into the box, or you take that 3, or, you take that PK, whatever it is, you do that stunt, whatever it is, and you take that 10, 15 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds leading up into that to do that.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to do it just during the day. Like, oh, life is stressful. It's like, do it on the field and in the dugout.
Yeah. Being intentional with it. Like, even most people are going to visualize in sport, whether they realize it or not, but that visualization will happen. But if you're intentional with that visualization, or even combining the breath work with visualization, I mean, thinking about it now after I just spoke on what I spoke, why not combine the two?
Right.
And I know that's done, but that kind of thing, and the intention of actually having an outcome from what you're doing, not just going through the motions of doing it. Because you can go through simple breaths and box breathing and those kind of things, but if you're actually in the right mindset while you're doing it, the changes that you can make and how you'll feel after that's going to be so much more than if you're just going through those motions.
And here's the real-time example of that. I like wrapping it into a real-time example. Those of us that have played baseball, I'm going to use the baseball example. You get that one pitcher from across the state that throws like 98. And it's like, man, we're seeing that guy. Trevor's going to be on the mound today, and he throws 98, and he's being scouted by this, that, and the other. And it's like, that's okay. Recognize and acknowledge that, because that ain't going to change. He's going to stand up there on the mound and he's going to hum it. And you're visualizing that, but just know you're visualizing from a great perspective. Now we've got to change the speak towards it. So you're visualizing what is going to happen. Good. You're halfway there. Now the other half we have to stimulate, that is 95% of the time forgotten, is what are you going to do with it? He's going to throw 96 to 98, and you have not made it to the fact that, and I'm going to step in the box and do what? What's his favorite pitch to go to? That's not 90. Like, start to visualize that. This goalie is 6'10" and being drafted and going here and on the Olympic team and whatever else. And you're in PKs, and like, you're already visualizing this, and you can't go down the route as like, well, they're probably going to save it. It's like, no, that's who's going to be in goal. Now take the next step, and what are you going to do about it? What are you going to visualize, and how are you going to celebrate when you overcome that?
Yeah. It's all about finding the ways, what works best for you to manage all these stresses and expectations that are going to come at different angles at all times during the sport from different people. And, finding what works best for you. Because like what he said was something totally different than what I said that would work for me. And a lot of that comes from personality, personal preferences, past experiences. So try something that you maybe haven't tried before. If you think breath work is silly or just breathing is silly, give it a try. You might be surprised. Because at one point in my life, I thought it was silly until I found the benefits of it. So
It's not pretend. Let me put it that way, because I think that's one thing that we probably thought when we were younger is it's like, oh, you're just going to do it to kind of psych yourself out and get yourself to think the opposite and just overcome it that way. No, like there is neurological, physiological effects that this does give as far as cognitive or literally how you think.
yeah. So a simple example of that is watch anybody shoot a free throw. What's one of the first things they're going to do? Yeah, exactly. It's like, let me calm my nerves. I'm on the line. I got to make this, So
I think the only two people that haven't and can get away with it, and you can go look this up, is like you see the Kobe did it, Jordan did it, when they're like, oh, keep talking.
Yep. And just
Drain it.
Yep.
Which speaks to this, and they've practiced a lot of this and they're so comfortable in it. One thing what else where are you going now?
I wasn't going really anywhere. I was, in a sense, going to wrap up. But
Well, as we wrap up, I do want to speak on the one side of this, that failure is inevitable. Okay. It's not failure. It's learning. And you might get up and see that person who's 6'10", throwing 96, 98 miles an hour as a junior in high school, and they're going to strike you out, make you look silly, and you're either going to stand there or you're going to swing so late that it's like disgusting and you'd ever want to see the film. It's okay.
yeah.
It's okay. So how do you go about handling that when it is a down day and you get waxed 12-0 and he, has 16 Ks, or, you're in cheer or gymnast and you have, 4 falls in a matter of 30 seconds halfway through the routine and you didn't even make it to the back half yet. How do you deal with that stress? And as I continue to speak on it here, the number one thing that comes to my head is it doesn't define you. And going back to your point, breathe through it, change the physiology of what it is, recognize it, and GTFOI. If y'all don't know what that acronym means, you could probably figure it out, but get the fuck over it. Like, it's okay. What can you learn from it? But because I just don't want to skip over the fact that things are going to get stressful, and it's not always going to go the way you want. But
Well, if you're not having those experiences, you're not growing. The athletes that have those experiences are the ones that are performing at the highest level and excelling at the highest level, because they've gone through the stresses, they've gone through all the hardships, they've gone through all that stuff that makes them a better athlete and a better person, because they've dealt with it, they've processed it, and then they've moved forward with it and used that in a positive way to make them better.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't know some of these techniques, or you don't know how to incorporate them, if you're a parent trying to, talk to your student athlete, or if you're a student athlete that wants to know more about these things, you don't have to have it all figured out. We're laying the foundations to ask better questions, get better answers, and give some ideas, tips, tricks, but also further the conversation. Like, don't be afraid to reach out. And if it's not us, don't be afraid to ask more questions. If you have a sports psychologist you trust, or a friend, or maybe you've got a family member who played high-level sports, or friend's family who had high-level sport, like, don't be afraid to ask for help on what they did through it. I would highly encourage that. If you're going to start somewhere and you don't know where to start there. Ask better questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm looking forward to adding more mental components to this podcast, because we have a lot of good topics coming up with the mental side of things. So this was a good one.
And we've got a couple good resources for it. So if you need those, we do have resources in our pocket to help with that. If you need to have a conversation with somebody who has a degree and does do work in sports psychology, we'd be happy to connect you. So hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Make sure you like and subscribe. Follow us on all the socials. Let us know if there's anything you'd like us to go over. Have a great week. See ya.